Welcome to Wine Wednesday. We're excited. It's 9 p.m. in Santiago, Chile, and 7 p.m. in New York. I'm Sam Kimball from New York Wine Events. Thank you for joining us on Virtual Day Trip to Wine Country, presented by Citi. We are here for 5 wines for 2021, a virtual tasting with Goldschmidt Vineyards. It's going to be fun, and hopefully we will discover some new and exciting, great new wine selections. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Please feel free to ask any questions during the session. You can use the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we will answer as many of those questions live and on the fly as possible throughout. Also, hit the chat if you would right now and let us know where in the world you are tuning in from. We love to see where everybody's at. We've got a great lineup of wines for this evening. And we also have an awesome panelist and guest speaker, the founder of the winery and a leading light in the wine world. So that's going to be great. I'm seeing Smyrna, Georgia. Hello, Smyrna. Stephanie from Los Angeles, welcome back. Great to see you. Myra, James from NYC. And wow, Myra's in the Dominican Republic. Good for you. Nancy in Long Island. Hi, Nancy. Great to see everybody. This evening, we are going to travel virtually to 2 wine regions around the world, California and Argentina. And our guest this evening will be coming to us from Chile in South America, obviously another wine region. And our theme for the session is, wait for it, New World Wines, and specifically 5 that are potentially great selections and picks for 2021. Both of the wine regions represented, California and Argentina, are famous for producing world-class wines. Let's take a look. Just as a quick backgrounder, here I have California in my background, and California is obviously a major producer of wine. It is, of course, a New World region. It makes the vast majority of American wine production. And a fun fact, if California were its own country, a separate country, it would be the world's 4th largest wine producer. Wine growing dates back 200 plus years in the state of California, to, in fact, long before it was even a state. So really a huge influence. And obviously, for those of us here in the US, a big part of our wine drinking and wine enjoying lives. The other area we are going to, in terms of the source of the wines that we're tasting and reviewing tonight, is Argentina. And Argentina is the 5th largest producer of wine in the world. Argentine wine, as with many aspects of Argentine cuisine, has its roots in Spain. During the Spanish colonization of the Americas, vine cuttings from Spain were brought to Argentina in 1557. So wine growing in Argentina dates back 450 plus years, which is super interesting. You might ask, why do I mention these things? I mention them because although technically correct, the label, quote, New World for these regions is maybe misleading. These are wine regions that have been making great wine for a long time, especially in the case of Argentina, where it goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. Getting back to where we're headed, our programming is 5 wines for 2021. We're excited about reviewing those with the winemaker. All of these wines are made by one winemaker, and that winemaker is Nick Goldschmidt of Goldschmidt Vineyards. Nick is a wine industry superstar. He's been on this broadcast before. He's a globetrotter. Every year he makes wines in California, New Zealand, and Argentina, and actually consults on making wine in some other places as well. To learn all about Goldschmidt Vineyards, check out the URL and the web address in my background. And of course, of the 5 wines we're reviewing, you can get them at goldschmidtvineyards.com. And there they are, the 5 wines. And of course, there is also a promo code, which is 5 wines. And that actually gets you 20% off. So great discount on these wines for anybody who's interested in picking them up. And with that, I'd like to bring Nick in. Welcome, Nick. It is great having you back on this show.
Yeah, no, awesome to be here, and it's a welcome change to speak English for a little while, for an hour with you.
Well, so where does this broadcast find you this evening? In Chile?
Well, I'm in a little place called La Dehesa, which is it's one of the, it's a comuna in Santiago. I just traveled here today. I've been working in Maipo. I've been in Alto Huel, which is in the Andes region of the Alto Maipo. And then tomorrow I'll be going to Lleida, which is to the coast, the Maipo coast. And I'll also be passing through Casablanca. Casablanca is a sub-region of the Aconcagua. So tomorrow I'll touch 3 different appellations. But I'm down here for 5 weeks. I come 3 times a year for, well, officially, like I talk about, I've been coming for 30 years, but really I first started coming to Chile in 1990 when Pinochet was in power. And, but I took a hiatus for about 5 years and started coming back here when I was winemaker for LVMH. So wow. LVMH, of course, owned Citi. So I was a winemaker at Citi for 14 years in California. Although I am from New Zealand, there wasn't many Kiwi winemakers in the US at that time. So, but yeah, LVMH gave me a big jump start, and I came down to Argentina with a winery called Terrazzas. We were in New Zealand with Cloudy Bay, or in Australia with Cape Mantel, Roses in Portugal, etc., etc. So yeah, and so in 2008, when I left the corporate world, I'd been in the corporate environment for 28 years, for 4 different owners, but only 2 jobs. I decided to continue consulting. And so today I consult in Canada, Mexico, Chile, Argentina, New Zealand, Australia. So all New World countries, according to your definition. My definition is I follow the earthquakes, because earthquakes are far more interesting. Obviously in California and Canada, we have earthquakes, British Columbia. New Zealand, of course, just had a massive earthquake last week, as you probably saw. We were worried about the tsunami hitting us here in Chile. And obviously Chile and Argentina with the Andes, we have massive earthquakes here. The only country where we don't have earthquakes really is Australia, but Australia's pretty boring, big flat pancake,
So do I have this correct? Are you correlating earthquakes with really good places to grow grapes and make wine?
Exactly. So when the beautiful thing about complexity is having properties. So even our properties in California, my biggest property in California is 40 acres that I own. And on that 40 acres, I have 5 different soil types, and each of those soil types and aspect, etc., makes a completely different wine. I could plant Cabernet on all 5 of those different soils, but we also have different slopes in between them, etc. I mean, the wines are just incredibly diverse in a small area. So you could pick up a stone and throw it and you're at a different soil type. And that's how we make complex wines from one site. So everything that we do is one vineyard, one vintage, one variety, and all of our wines are vegan. So we have 4 Vs. And it's that, the storytelling of wine is what's so important. I mean, we can all make wine. Sam, even you could make wine, mate.
I make it every night in the bathtub.
Thank you for sharing. But what you have to do is be able to give that wine a reason for being. And so one of the really great luck, the big piece of luck that I have, is because of of these big corporations like Constellation, Allied American, Jim Beam, they sent me around the world, and I got to meet some of the best winemakers in the world and work with them. And so today, when I travel around, I still hang out with them. I stay in their houses. I eat their food. I play with their kids, and it's the cultural aspect of wine that's so important today as well. And you know what it's like when you go to a restaurant and when I go to a restaurant, I want to buy something. I want to order food that I've never had before.
Yeah.
And tied in with that, I want a bottle of wine that I've never. I'm going out for dinner for an experience. I don't want to drink a wine that I can just go down to the store and buy and plonk on the table and impress everyone in the restaurant. That's not, I just laugh at those sort of people. I embrace the people that try something new and something different when you go out. I mean, and especially with COVID, we're all anxious. We all want to go out, and have a good time now. So I'm really looking forward to that. But the cultural aspect of wine, and the other thing too is, before the COVID, I was in Austria, and I don't like Gruner, but much. But I have to tell you, when I was in Austria, I drank Gruner for a week. It was fantastic, eating it with Wiener Schnitzel and enjoying the Austrian atmosphere. The wines were wines you'd never see in the US. And then I came back to the US and bought a bottle of Gruner. And I'm like, it doesn't taste the same.
So, and by the way, for those of wine neophytes like me, you're talking about Gruner Veltliner, which is sort of the national white wine of Austria.
Correct. It just tastes so much better in Austria. Surrounded by Austrian people with Austrian, and that's why wine is so important to travel. Come to California, see the vineyards, see the wineries, talk to the winemaker. And it's much easier to do it in Sonoma County than it is in Napa. Obviously, I make a lot of Napa wine too, but coming to Sonoma County, coming to Healdsburg, we're only 1 hour north of the Golden Gate Bridge. It's a great place to come visit. We've got 270 wineries. We've got 4 appellations right there. And then once you fall in love with that concept, once you get used to that concept, then try going to a wine region in another country. I mean, British Columbia for us is just up the road, or Niagara for you in Canada. I mean, There are so many places, and it's not like we're making beer or spirits. I mean, I made beer for a while. What are you doing tomorrow? Same as yesterday, which is the same as the day before, which is what I'm going to be doing tomorrow.
Right.
The key with beer is you got to make it the same every time. But with wine, we got different vintages, different climate. The berries are big, the berries are small. We got rain. We got and so we get to tell the story every year. It's a different story every year.
I have this dream of when things open up again, and it's probably next year or sometime in the future, of doing a small group experience where we go on a world tour, and we go there's a week in Northern California, there's a week in New Zealand, there's a week in all these places, and you have that immersive, what you're talking about is an immersive community experience around the wine region, and the food and culture that go with the wine.
Yeah. I mean, during COVID, I've got 9 kids, and all my children came home with partners. I got 9 in my bubble, and I have this theory, Sam. I probably told you, the average white guy lives to 84, and I'm 58, so I've got 17,900 days left. If I drink one bad bottle of wine, that's like throwing a good one against the wall. So the beautiful thing about COVID is having 9 in your bubble is we're drinking 3-4 bottles a night. Yeah. So I'm well ahead of the curve. I'm doing my utmost to get through that 17,900 bottles ahead of time.
That's awesome.
But it's the experience, you got to drink that wine with food, and it's just got to have that perk up. Like, for instance, the first wine that you're going to show tonight, the Forefathers Sauvignon Blanc, that wine that's from New Zealand too, Sam. Sorry, I didn't chip in, but it's the Forefathers Sauvignon Blanc that we're showing. That's from Marlborough.
It's from Marlborough. Okay, well, then I stand corrected.
But the idea of this wine is that when I went to Portugal many years ago, and it's 110 degrees. I hope there's no one from Portugal online, but 110 degrees, and when you're hanging out with winemakers, you drink port. 3 ports for breakfast, 3 ports for lunch, and 3 ports for dinner. The food is really hard to eat. They eat these barnacles, these little things, and you need 3 of them for a mouthful. It's 110, and I'm drinking port, and it's day 2. And I said to the winemaker, dude, man, I'd really like to have a glass of white wine. He goes, Nick, we don't make white wine in Portugal. And this lady walks by and she goes, oh, I'll get you a glass. And she comes back, the wine's filled up to here and the condensation's pouring off it. And I'm like, man, what was that? The enamel on my teeth is gone, the roof of my mouth is gone. I'm like, what the heck? I didn't know what a Vinho Verde was, but a Vinho Verde is a, quote unquote green wine from Portugal. But it's that sensation, Sam, am I hungry or thirsty? And that's what Forefathers Sauvignon Blanc is all about, going back and have that second glass, and I'm thirsty or hungry, and we can all sell 1 glass of wine, but can we sell 2 glasses of wine? Or do you want to have that second glass? And that's that's the key factor, Hey, give me that wine again.
Well, I think that's a great segue into the first wine. And what I'd like to do actually is also show here, and I'm going to try to find it just in my
I have
background.
I have a map of New Zealand on my.
Well, I have one handy here, and it just quickly in the background. So here's New Zealand in my background, right? And right sort of where the two islands, the two large land masses, at the top of the bottom one is the Marlborough region, correct?
Sort of.
Yeah, I mean it's towards the northern end of that.
Yeah, it's
the
can
southern
you see my
island.
mouse? Yeah, it's to the east of there. To the west is an area called Nelson. So they're two appellations fairly close to each other.
Well, and I'm dying. I've never been to New Zealand and I've never been to Marlborough, but this first wine, which is the Forefathers Sauvignon Blanc, I mean the flavor profile, the aromatics. I don't know what goes on in Marlborough in New Zealand for these Sauvignon Blancs, but it's extraordinary, like what you get from these wines in terms of flavor profile and the the taste is extraordinary.
Yeah, there's three things. There's sort of three things that make that up. Number one, the climate. It's you got the Alps, the Southern Alps, and by the way, the Southern Alps are bigger than Switzerland and Austria put together. That's how big the Alps are, and they are to the west. You've got the Richmond Range to the north and the Wither Hills to the south. So it's this beautiful little rain shadow effect, and so we get it's a much warmer region than you'd typically get at this latitude. And that's the second point, is the latitude is such a long way south. So when you're that far south, the sun is obviously lower in the horizon. So you get longer days, but you don't get the heat intensity. And this is why, Napa Valley Sauvignon, it's too hot for Sauvignon Blanc in Napa.
Right.
To get these sort of characters. In fact, even Russian River is a little bit on the toasty side if you really want to go that far. So, I mean, when I drink Sauvignon Blanc, I want to feel alive. I want to have that subtropical passion fruit. I'm not a big grassy fan. I mean, a lot of New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs are grassy because the British drink more New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc than the Americans. And, the British, whatever, they don't have the greatest palates in the world. Look at what they eat. So, and then the third thing is the way that we make. Well, sorry, I should add. While those mountains are there, what we have is we have two very different soil types. We have the glacial soils that came off the Wither Hills and form these river valleys, which is what we call the Brancott. And then on the other side, we have the Wairau River, which forms what we call the Rapara. So you always know where you are. If you pick up a stone, it's round, you're in the Rapara. If it's jaggedy, you're in the Brancott. And then lastly, the way we make the wine. These are all fresh wines. There's 99% of all the Sauvignon Blanc and Marlborough is made in stainless steel without any wood. It's very clean, straight to bottle. We'll be picking 2021 in the next 2 weeks, and we'll have it in the bottle and in the US by September. Yeah. So it's very straightforward, and and that's the beauty of it. People like it because it's flesh and rich, but
it's really clean and refreshing. So this is a wine. So let's talk about if you would, the tasting notes and characteristics of this Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand. This is a wine to me that makes me thirsty as opposed to hungry. I want to drink more of it.
Yeah, it's that salinity that you get in that wine, and we do not sell this wine to any other country except the US. And the name of the wine is called Waxeye. And it's pretty interesting. Waxeye is the name of the bird that eats all the grapes. They're called waxeyes or silver eyes. And these birds fly in a flock of 2,000 or 3,000. The sky goes black when they're coming overhead. And if you shoot with a shotgun, if you don't kill 7, it was a bad shot. But this wine was the first wine I ever made on my own. We first made it when I was still working at LVMH in 1998 was the first vintage. And Forefathers means the premium appellation for that variety in the New World. So we make a Forefathers Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc, a Forefathers Shiraz from McLaren Vale in Australia, a Forefathers Malbec, from Argentina and a Cabernet, Forefathers Cabernet from California. So this is before layer cake, cupcake, and all the other cakes. This is single vineyard, single varietal, single vintage. On the label, you'll notice that's a pair of my boots. You can't quite see it on the photo here, but that's a pair of my boots. And in the faded out writing in the background is my constitution, which basically is about fish-friendly farming, no herbicide use, and making wines that and preserving vineyards for not only now but also for the future. And that signature on the bottom there is actually not mine. It's actually John Hancock's signature. I stole from the Constitution and changed to my own. So that's the story.
Say, it looks a little like the John Hancock. By the way, Arlene just shared that she loves going wine touring in New Zealand. So
yeah, it's interesting to tour in New Zealand because it's not like California where you just drive down the road and pop into the next tasting room. In Marlborough, we're not really set up, even though Marlborough's it's a city of 30,000 people and 100 wineries. Most wineries do not have tasting rooms. And so you sort of have to book ahead and plan it a little bit, plan a bit more. It's like when I first came to Healdsburg 30 years ago. That's what it reminds me of. It's a bit of a retro, the hotels are not they're not the most salubrious, and the restaurants are not that common, so it takes a bit of forethought, and so part of the planning process is the excitement of the trip, so yeah, if you have any problems, definitely send me an email and I'll make a few suggestions for you when you come out.
So would you call that, now you worked on Cloudy Bay, I mean, these are Cloudy Bay, Kim Crawford, some of the really famous Sauv Blancs that have become quite popular in the US. Would you say this Forefathers, which I think is incredibly reasonably priced, Sauvignon Blanc is a classic Marlborough Sauv Blanc, or are there some characteristics that are different and unique? I mean, tell us about the tasting notes on this one.
As I said, it's a wine I only make for the US. The big difference is if you look at what I'm drawing right now. So New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc typically comes in the mouth kind of broad and has this very lean, tight character, high acidity, high CO2, carbon dioxide, making those wines tight. But because in the US, we eat a lot of Mediterranean food, I want to have more texture. So I do that by, when I press the grapes, I leave the juice sitting in tank for an extra 10 days. Then I rack it off and ferment, rather than, people talk about surly aging and aging on wine lees and stirring lees. Yeah, no, whatever. I try to get a little bit more weight and texture into this wine, but predominantly New Zealand is grassy, asparagus-y, or armpit sweat. Those are the three big characters. I try not to be in those, or the grapefruit. I want to be a little bit more subtropical, passion fruit, some gingery elements to it as well. But yeah, the passion fruit character is probably the most dominant for me. And we have two vineyards in Marlborough, one on the Brancott soil, which is what this is. So these glacial soils are a little bit more, we've got a little bit more soil in them, so we can push the maturity a little bit more. Not that we're pushing the alcohol. All these wines are obviously under 14 alcohol. Whereas over on my other brand called Boulder Bank comes from over on the Rapara, which is on a stony soil. There you're going to get sort of more lime and apple and sort of more acidic type wines. But Forefathers is a really, really special wine. I used to sell the grapes to one of those wineries that you already mentioned, and at a much higher price. And when that company was sold, I took the grapes back for myself, and hence we make this wine today at about $10 cheaper than it used to be.
So tropical fruits are the primary, and passion fruits the primary flavor characteristics. Myra just asked, can you find this wine outside of the website? Is it available in retail, for example?
Yeah, we sell this wine. I mean, we distribute in 48 states. Forefathers Sauvignon Blanc is not in all of them, but I'd say it's probably in at least 15 of those states. Okay. Again, you can send me an email and I can tell you where you can get it. So yeah, if you just nick@goldschmidtvineyards.com, you can get me.
Is it, I mean, we have probably half of our folks are from around the country and half are in the New York metro. Is it available in a big market like New York metro?
Oh yeah, it's available in New York. Our distributor over there is called Dutton, and it was predominantly a restaurant brand. Obviously, with the demise of the restaurant industry, unfortunately, at the moment, it's sort of taken a bit of hiatus. So you can probably you'll be able to find it in small independent retailers in New York, and that's pretty much what it's like across the country. We do not sell this into big box stores. Just like we count on small independent retailers supporting us, we choose to support them by not making it available in some of the really big chains or supermarkets that you may go into.
I will say for everyone watching that I order wine from time to time from Nick and his team. When I order it from the website or if I call, it comes really fast, and I'm across the country on the East Coast. So Myra, you can get it in retail, but it's also they're super quick and it's easy to get it through.
And you get 20% off.
And you get 20% off if you buy it from Goldschmidt. All right, let's go to the next one, which is the Singing Tree Dutton Chardonnay 2017. Now, is this a steel fermented or oak aged Chardonnay?
No, this is, so if you want my steel fermented, the regular Singing Tree is the way to go. That wine is about 40% made in concrete, 60% in used barrel. I don't add any yeast. In fact, I put the yeast under stress, and so you get these really feral, really interesting aromatics. But the Dutton is more of a traditional. Remember, I came from semi wineries, so half of what we did was Chardonnay up and down the Russian River for years. And the problem is, starting in 1990, all the great Chardonnay vineyards were pulled out because we had a thing called phylloxera. And when I say great Chardonnay, these were non-clones. So I could talk all day about rootstocks and clones and Marsal and field selection. So this is an old field selection. It's still on AXR1, which was the rootstock that was pulled out because of phylloxera. And the reason why it still exists is because it's on a gold-ridge sandy loam. So it's a talcum powder soil, and the phylloxera cannot live in it. And so very low organic matter. And
so the soil is like the consistency of like baby talcum powder. It's like
correct. Yeah.
Wow.
If you go on my YouTube channel, you can see me pick up the soil, and it's talcum powder and very little organic matter. The second really important thing, and what I was building up to, is this vineyarding. Because this vineyard exists and it's old, so this vineyard was planted in the 70s. So we talk about old vine Zinfandel a lot. Sometimes we talk about old vine Cabernet. We very rarely talk about old vine Chardonnay, and this is old vine Chardonnay. And it's a field selection. So instead of a clone, a definition of a clone is you can trace everything back to one plant. There's a mother plant. But with a field selection, there was no mother plant. So these plants were selected based on how they tasted. We collected the cuttings from those vines, and then we propagated them, and we could just put them on the rootstock at that time, which, as I said, was AXR1. What we didn't know was the material that we were putting on top was actually related to the rootstock. So the French had sold us this rootstock called AXR1, which somebody had blended some Vitis vinifera in. So there's two types of vinifera, Vitis vinifera and Vitis labrasca. Vitis vinifera is what you know, Chard, Cab, Merlot, Savy, Riesling, all that stuff. Vitis labrasca is the rootstock that is resistant to phylloxera. And we thought we were grafting Vitis vinifera on the Vitis labrasca, but we weren't. This Vitis labrasca actually had a bit of Vitis vinifera in it. So these things were related. So the compatibility was really good. And that's why Chardonnay, starting in the 60s, 70s, 80s, was so easy to grow, because they were compatible. And when we had to get rid of AXR1 and use the new rootstock, the Vitis labrasca, we found that the field selections were not compatible. And that's when they defined clones. So the clone meant there was no virus in it, which meant it had good compatibility with the new rootstock. And that's why today, all the Chardonnay tastes like a white peach. Mm-hmm. When you get a glass of Chardonnay, if someone says to me, Nick, your Chardonnay smells of white peach, I almost want to pull the glass of wine out of their hand and throw it away. Right. But what you get with this wine is you're going to get, this is called SEE, S-E-E. It is not a clone. It's a mass selection or field selection. And the definition of C is melon. So the orange melon character, that is what you get. And now on top of that, you can say it's not pineapple. Pineapple is the top, melon, and then stone fruit, peaches, nectarines, etc. So we're in that middle band. The second thing, so that describes the aroma. The second thing on the mouth is when you drink singing tree, our normal singing tree from the Russian River, it's going to be a little bit more structural, whereas this one's going to be a bit more textural. So it's a bit warmer and richer and fuller. And
well, it has a little bit of that oak aging characteristic for it's getting some structure and flavor from the oak too. Yeah.
Well, one of the main reasons I use barrel is not because of the wood, but it's because I don't want to add preservative. I don't want to add SO2. I'm a little bit unusual in the way that I preserve wines. I learned this at Citi many years ago. Sulfur dioxide is added to pretty much every wine that you drink, but sulfur dioxide is added to pretty much every food that you eat. You just don't know it. So I'm a very low SO2 user. And so what I try to do is make the wine super stable in barrel. So open it up to oxygen, allow the oxygen to form. And the Chardonnay goes really, really dark, much darker than what's in your glass tonight. But then when I do add the small amount of SO2, the wine is very, very stable. So I don't actually have to add very much. So when you drink a normal Chardonnay, to put a number on it, you're probably drinking at about 30, 35 parts free and 100 parts total. When you drink our wine, you're talking about 10, 12 free and about 60 total. So the numbers are about half of what you would normally get in Chardonnay.
Less sulfur dioxide goes into this Chardonnay than a typical Chardonnay. And
that's why you pay, and that's why you pay a little bit more for it. You're also paying because it's Dutton. So Dutton's a very famous vineyard, obviously.
Right. So, and then, okay, great. I happen to, the trend has been, and it's a little bit of a what's in style, what's in vogue type of thing for steel fermented Chardonnay, steel fermented white wines. I happen to still love a really well-made, balanced oak aged Chardonnay. And especially with food, what is a great combination food pairing wise with this wine?
Well, I'll tell you what, I had two bottles. I actually brought one all the way to Chile to celebrate with you tonight, but I drank it. So, the other night I made because I don't mix socially very with many people here. I have my own condo here in Santiago. I mean, normally I have people around every night and I cook because I just love to cook. And so I had a pork chop the other night with this, and I prepared it was like tomato and cheese. It was like a really interesting recipe. It was like a spicy tomato sauce, not tomato sauce like but like more Asian in style. And then to soften it up, I actually put some mozzarella cheese into it. And then, man, my neighbors came over and they had it with me. And then 2 nights ago, I had it with salmon, which obviously is it's actually a richer food. And for that, I just made a yellow sauce with some lemon rind, some ginger, and actually made it like a reduction sauce. So I put some white wine vinegar in it and some of the Chardonnay in it as well, and reduced that for about half an hour, and then poured it over the salmon. Man, it was amazing. Great dish. So yeah, if you guys ever want some of those recipes as well, I'm more than willing to send them to you. So yeah, it's what I love to do, is especially when I'm on my own, because then when I go home, I got all these recipes that I've been playing with that I can cook for my kids. So I test them out on myself and my neighbor. Yeah, so it's kind of cool being locked down during COVID and not being able to socialize. Just gives me more time to try different foods and different blends. Yeah.
So Nancy says you sound like quite the chef.
Oh, I'm not. No.
I haven't had your food, Nick, but I know that you are quite the host, especially in the summer when you're home with all those kids and their significant others, and you're gathered around the family table opening 3 to 4 bottles. That sounds like a good time, actually.
Yeah, I thought about, because my daughters, you've known on one of our previous Zoom meetings that my daughters participate with me, And it's also important that they cook with me too. So at night, we talk about, we'll drink the wine with whatever daughter. I have sons, but I don't make wine with my sons, even though one of them's a winemaker. But with my daughters, I will drink their wine, and we'll try and twist the meal into something that either incorporates the wine or some spicy flavor that they see in the wine, and help them with that as well. So it's a big family thing,
And I have to say, I mean, listen, we all love to have a nice glass of wine, and a nice glass of wine oftentimes by itself is wonderful. I have in recent years, and especially in the last year with being home and with everything going on, I have sort of rediscovered the magic of food and wine pairing in a more focused way, where when you find that soft, sort of smelly cheese that's delicious, and there's a rosé that just matches and it just goes so well, that's a magical moment. And so I've been really on a mission to uncover as many of those as possible, because like your wines, I always love drinking your wines. They're all delicious. But then if I find something to go with this Singing Tree Chardonnay, the Dutton vineyard, that is just makes it even better, it's a great thing. So
the Singing Tree Chardonnay Dutton is going to be far more food friendly. It goes across more dishes than like the Forefathers Sauvignon Blanc. I mean, Forefathers Sauvignon Blanc, the thing to remember about food and wine is always make sure that the wine has more of it than the food. So this is why drinking Cabernet with chocolate is a waste of time. I mean, if it's unsweetened chocolate, yes, but if it's sweet chocolate, no. So what I wanted, like the Sauvignon Blanc is clear. This is the best dish for Sauvignon Blanc. Even oysters and lemon and okay, I love it. Worked great. But what I really like is asparagus with some prosciutto with just a little bit of lemon. You can make the dish in like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's just the perfect match. I mean, it makes the Sauvignon Blanc just sing, and the asparagus takes away the green character. Any sort of, if you don't like green, and sometimes your guests don't like it, you give them a little taste of asparagus, and boom, that wine just screams at you. And the other thing, here's a really easy one. This is really basic. Cabernet and eggplant.
No, that's great.
So because eggplant is really tannic. So if you find the wine tannic, cook the eggplant. I'm not a big fan of eggplant, but if you cook the hell out of it, like your mother does, until the water turns purple, and then you eat it, it's like, but that eggplant is bitter, and it'll make a Cabernet, a cheap Cabernet or an acidic or a dry Cabernet taste sweet, because there's more, so there's more of it. So it's quite cool.
My favorite new Sauvignon Blanc pairing of the last few months was fresh popped popcorn with lemon zest grated on top, and Sauvignon Blanc. That was like the easiest thing in the world. And so so speaking of Cabernet, the next wine is the Embankment Cabernet 2018. This is a hugely accessible wine in terms of price. It's in the mid $20 range, and it's one of the things that I've learned over the years is that, man, some of these Sonoma Cabernets, I mean, everyone talks about Napa Valley Cabernet, which is great, but they're very, very expensive. And here you have the Embankment Cabernet 2018 from Goldschmidt, and it's $20-something a bottle, and it's amazing. So tell us a little bit about this, the provenance of this one, and what are the tasting notes? I'll put it up on the screen for everybody to see.
So the Embankment is a wine. So we have Goldschmidt Vineyards as our big group of wineries, but we make some little select little wines. So in 2008, which is when I went out on my own, it was a very difficult time to go out, because if you remember, the economy was sucking, and 2009 was not a lot easier, and a lot of the small independent growers had been let go, and they were calling me looking for help. So I took on this vineyard. It's a beautiful little vineyard just north of Simi on the east side. Sorry, just north of Healdsburg on the east side. And this is an old family. They're called the Passalacquas, not the Passalacqua winery that you may know, but this is the Passalacqua family. They're an old Italian family, and they got one of the most outrageously beautiful vineyards in all of the Alexander Valley. It's one of the southernmost vineyards. It faces east, which means that in the morning you get sunshine. You do not get the afternoon burn, so the alcohol stay relatively low, and we still have very good turgor in the berries. So when I bring it into the winery, I can extract the heck out of it. The name Embankment originated from the idea that in New Zealand we put stop banks around the properties to prevent the rivers coming over into the vineyard. So we build these mounds. But Embankment sort of has the same philosophy, but it's the property line, if you like. So the embankment or the property line around it. And unfortunately, property lines were designed where the river was or where the road was or where the hill was, rather than soil. So if we broke our properties up on soil, we'd have completely different shaped properties that might be a little bit difficult to manage, but that's what embankment means. But this is a really, really special vineyard. It's we only produce about 20 tons of this Cabernet. On the vineyard, we also have Merlot, a bit of Chardonnay, and we also make a little bit of a red blend. We also make Zinfandel under this label, but it comes from my own property a little bit further north. But yeah.
And is this one widely available? Like if somebody's, or is this one you gotta order from the winery?
Well, it's available in Texas, Tennessee, Kentucky, Georgia. It's available in the South. It's just being launched in Florida right now.
Yep.
And there is one store in New York that carries it, but I can't remember which one it is. Sorry.
Well, again, you get 20% off from the promo code here, so that's going to be better than any store. Describe this one in terms of aromatics, the nose, the bouquet, and the taste characteristics of this wine.
Well, the first thing you want to remember is that there's a very simple rule between Alexander Valley and where I make most of our Napa Valley, which is Oakville. So, number one, Alexander Valley is going to give you more red fruit. So if you think about, I like to think, I'm firstborn, right? So it's got to be very easy for me to understand. So high in red fruit is like strawberry, loganberry. Then you get into the red cherry, blueberry, black cherry, blackberry, black currant. Okay, so from warm fruit to red fruit to black fruit. Alexander Valley is more of that red cherry, blueberry aromatic. And that's because Alexander Valley is cooler than Napa Valley. So Napa Valley has more heat. So you're going to drive that sugar faster in the berry, get dehydration, and move the wine into the black fruit realm much quicker than you do in the Alexander Valley. In the mouth, the Alexander Valley is going to have a little bit more acidity. So this is why with Alexander Valley wine, Alexander Valley Cabernet, drink them with food. And in the cheese course, drink the Napa Valley. Because by then, the end of the evening, your palate's a little bit more worn out, and Napa's going to have a little bit more higher alcohol. It's going to be, and as a result, it's going to taste a bit sweeter. So it's going to go better with the cheese course. I don't typically do carbs for dessert, but that's the way I think about it. So,
what's if you have this with sort of the main course, the Embankment Cabernet, what's a great choice for that main course?
Well, tonight I just had a entrania, which is a skirt steak, and I love Alexander Valley with the skirt steak because it has a little bit more fat. So there's a skirt steak and a flank steak. Don't get the two mixed up. So the skirt steak has got a little bit more fat in it, and that fattiness, and especially if you use a little bit of salt. And tonight I used I marinated. I didn't have much time because I just come from the south. I need about 40 minutes to cook to marinate. So I quickly used a soy and balsamic, a teriyaki and a balsamic mixture with some ginger and some cilantro to try and spice it up. And I just quickly used that for about 40 minutes or whatever. threw it on the barbecue at maximum heat, 10 minutes I'm eating the thing.
Right.
Well, I let it cool down for a little bit, but and that liveliness or that fruitiness that you get with that Alexander Valley acidity makes it really bright and really interesting, and that flank steak just melts in your mouth as a result. The skirt steak melts in your mouth.
That sounds amazing. So, yeah. That sounds amazing. Well, this one, again, to me, this is a great wine, but to me, it's also a great value because, you know, again, it's easy to buy a $150 bottle of Napa Valley Cabernet, but it's not, you know, that's a wine you're not going to just have with a really nice meal on a Wednesday night. You're going to be in the psychology of saving it for a special occasion. So what I love about this is that this is accessible and you can open it up and enjoy it with tonight's meal.
Yeah, I you know me, I'm always a bit sarcastic. So one of the, you know, if Kim Jong-un drops a nuclear bomb on California under the bunker, and you show up with your one bottle of $320 Cabernet that you bought at Costco, or your 4 6-packs of Embankment, who's going to get let in? I mean, it's you know, so often you pay for something other than wine. You pay for the brand, you pay for the packaging, you pay, you know, an Embankment is my message that good wine can also be, you know, a good value. And this wine has scored really well in magazine. Actually out on the East Coast, it scored really well in magazine. I think 91 points the Wine and Spirit just gave it. We know if we put the price at $100 and we send it out for scores, it'll get a higher score because, you know, a lot of scores are driven by price. We see that. But I think, yeah, I agree with you, Sam. This is just, I should really take the price up. I mean, the grapes cost $3,500 a ton, which tells you immediately it's a $40 bottle of wine. So it's a $40 bottle of wine that you're buying it for $25 or under.
You know what? That's what for me, that's what I live for, is finding those great selections that are terrific values. All right, so let's go to Argentina. Our next
I wish I could.
is the Chacras. Well, we're going virtually. The next wine is a Chacras Malbec, which Chacras is an area within the Mendoza, the famous Mendoza wine region, where you make some amazing Malbec. I'll put the bottle up on the screen, and let's talk about this one and what its distinguishing characteristics are.
Well, a lot of my knowledge of wine stems from being able to try things in South America, and Argentina was one of the first countries that I came to. So the first vintage, it was pretty funny. I just got contacted by a wine writer in Buenos Aires last week because they're writing the history of Argentina exports, and there was 2 of us gringos in Argentina at the beginning of the 90s. So I was one of them, and I was down there making a wine called Terrazzas. But in those days, you have to understand, you know, in Chile, we still had Pinochet was still in power. The junta had just finished in Argentina. So the economies were pretty depressed and people were pretty hard. You know, it was hard to get around. In fact, I lived in a town called Sagrada Familia here in Chile in 1989. I had the first car in town. I mean, we rode horses. This is 1989. That's not that far away. Argentina wasn't quite as repressed as because the junta had left power earlier, but the ability for us to get around was very difficult. So for us to drive from Mendoza to the Uco Valley, it would take us about 3 to 4 hours, depending on, you know, there were 1-lane roads and how many horses were on it. I mean, that determined how quick your trip was. Today, of course, there's a big fat 2-lane freeway going each way, and I can get there in an hour. But Chacras is this is sort of it's sort of an emotional thing for me, because Chacras is the name of the town where all the winemakers live. And to get to know winemakers in Argentina was a little bit difficult back in those days. The Spanish, if you speak like a Chilean, the Argentinians look at you kind of weird, because Chilean Spanish is a Spanish all by itself. And so it was hard to meet people, but I used to sit in a coffee shop in Chacras on the corner, and 50% of the winemakers live in Chacras, because there's a lot of good restaurants there, a lot of good bars, and some good retail stores. And so hence the name Chacras, and that's where the name comes from. And then this
it's
vineyard,
very high altitude where you grow these grapes. It's very high altitude. Yeah, it's like,
yeah.
how high is
So
it?
so the future of grapes is north, south, and altitude. I mean, coastal's been done, roads have been done, but so when you drink this Malbec, I know this is really hard to it's so hard to explain, but when you drink this, it's cool climate Malbec from a desert. So it's grown. I've skied the vineyard, so we're at 2.5 in feet. Sorry, almost 4,000 feet, and
So in the winter, it's a ton of snow. It's you.
oh yeah,
Like you can ski the vineyard, like you said.
I can ski the vineyard. Yeah, and the vineyard is 80 years old. So there's 4 regions in Argentina. The eastern region, which is where all the wineries are, that's where they grow Bonarda and a lot of alternative. There's 2 forms of Malbec. There's Cot and Malbec, and a lot of Cot produces a little higher tonnage and it's more spicy, but it's called Malbec. The main region is called the Central Valley. The Central Valley is the expensive area. That's where Vistalba, Lujan, Agrello, Pedregal, Lulunta, Lujan. I mean, that area is really super expensive, and that's called the Central Valley, and that's close to town. When I first started going to Mendoza, there was 500,000 people. Now there's 2 million. So the city has grown into, especially Vistalba, which is one of the best soils in the world. Then you got San Rafael to the north, to the south, which we don't really talk about very often because it gets hit by hail and the tannins down there are much grainier. And then the 4th region is the Uco Valley. Mm-hmm. And in my mind, there's sort of, I mean, Argentinians will tell you there's a zillion different sub-appellations of the Uco Valley. In my mind, there's basically 3. You've got the central piece, which is Tunajan, Altamira, Vista Flores, Altamira. And this vineyard comes from Altamira, which is the highest and oldest. And then to the north, we have La Consulta, and to the south, we have Tupungato. And we were the first people to start planting in Tupungato with Chandon, with Terrazzas. They were making champagne at that altitude. But so the vineyard, what's unique about this is you get 2-3 clusters per vine. And to explain old vine, I walked into an old vine vineyard yesterday. It's an 80-year-old Cabernet that I walked into yesterday here in Chile. And the winemaker's like, I don't get the concentration. I don't get the tannin. I don't understand this. And I'm like, dude, there is nothing to understand. Pick it early. Because in an old vine situation, the tannins become very malleable. The acidity holds. The yield is low, but you don't have to do anything to it. So there's very little management. And so that's exactly what this. So when you drink this wine, you're going to get purple fruit. I don't know how you describe purple fruit, but you get a lot of velvet and licorice is too strong, but you get that black texture and at the same time you get this beautiful pure acidity. And there's, this is mainly made in concrete. I don't talk too much about that. I say it's aged in neutral barrel. Well, it's not. I put about 40% of concrete in this wine as well. So you get a lot more minerality in this wine, and you just get this lovely effervescent. And this is 100% Malbec. There is no Cot and there's no Bonarda. When you buy a Malbec from Argentina for under 35 bucks, typically it's a blend of these other varietals. And ask me why they don't put it on the label, because they don't need to put it on the label.
Typically, what are the percentages? When you buy a cheap Malbec, what percentage is Malbec grapes versus Cot grapes versus something else?
Well, legally, it's 85% Cot or Malbec.
Okay,
because
so it's mostly, but the thing that's a little misleading is Malbec and Cot are 2 different grapes, but they still can call it a Malbec.
Correct.
Yeah, see, that's interesting. Now,
and it's cheap. It's about $1,000 a ton cheaper for Cot. Plus, it produces heavier.
On Malbec, I find when I drink Malbec that there's a lot of tannins, and I get this kind of dryness, sometimes a little harsh on the dryness in the finish when I'm swallowing. And what does being in the high altitude, does having this wine be 100% Malbec in its composition, does that alleviate some of that heavy tannin aspect?
Yes,
It
because the
does.
Malbec berry is bigger than a Cot berry, so your skin to pulp ratio is much less. Whereas Cot is going to give you more dry. Well, I hope there's no Argentinians listening. It'll give you more dryness and more acidity and a little bit shorter for me. So
is that now
the
is my criticism a common thing, that sort of that little bit of harsh dryness on the finish when it's a cheaper Malbec?
Yeah, I think so. I think that Malbec in general can be hollow, but I mean Bonarda, for those who've never tried a Bonarda, it's a great wine, man. You should.
Which is
It's like drinking
a different grape. That's another grape
That's
from
a different
Mendoza
grape, yeah.
in Argentina. Yeah, which we
Yeah,
don't.
and
I
it's
mean, Americans drink 5 grapes. I mean, so Bonarda is like you're speaking Greek, like we've never heard of that.
yeah, but Bonarda's got high pH and it's black, so it's actually the perfect American wine. But because it's not Cabernet or Malbec, the Americans aren't going to drink it. But yeah, just see if you can find it. But don't spend $10 on a Bonarda. See if you can find something a bit better. It's like drinking Cabernet from Chile. You know, people go, "Oh, I don't like Cabernet, and I don't know how to say it. It smells green." Well, spend more than 20. You know, buy a really good one as your first one, and then sort of understand what a good Cabernet tastes like, and then you can trade around and see if you can find something equivalent for a better price. But this is just a really luscious, sweet. And 2018 was one of the best vintages in Argentina. In fact, if you're really trying to keep things simple and you're worried about vintages, 2018 was probably the best vintage globally. The only country that had a bad vintage was New Zealand, but every other country, 2018 was a great vintage.
Now, is this a good combination? This Malbec, would you have it with like a classic Argentinian dish like a churrasco steak? Like a chimichurri sauce? I mean, what would you pair this wine with?
Yes, somebody just asked about 2012. Yeah, I'll take 2012 in California was probably one of the best vintages ever. I will take a 2012 anytime. And it was not too hot. That was the Goldilocks vintage. To go back to your comment, you know what? I like to, again, chimichurris, yeah, okay, why not? Yeah, it's the acidity of the tomato that I think pairs well with this, but you don't want to have you want to have a ripe tomato, whatever you guys say, a ripe tomato. You know, you don't want to have too much green or too much of the skin character, but you know, maybe tone down the onions or whatever else you're going to put it in. And I mean, we eat a lot of those sauces here in Chile. Of course, they say they invented these sauces in Chile, but you know, they stole them from Peru and Bolivia.
Now, now for you, I mean, you made this wine. Does this wine make you hungry or thirsty?
Makes me thirsty. Drinking, when you open this, we have a hard time putting it down. So,
so this is a drinking wine. This is a bring it out to the barbecue and hang out with it.
Well, yeah, I mean that's what asados in Argentina. This is what it's. You know, I don't know if you know when you come to Argentina and hang out, when you put your trip together, Sam, be prepared. You know, my friends say, "Come over for lunch. We're lighting the fire at 2." Well, they talk about lighting the fire at 2. It means they put the meat on at 4. You know, and what they do is they'll start off with a spicy sausage, and then they'll go to a flank steak, and then they'll go to a bigger steak, and then they'll put on the chops or whatever heck else they do, and I mean it just goes on and on and on. I mean an Argentinian barbecue can last 5 hours. It's not it's a total social gathering. So when you're standing there, you don't want to be drinking a big, heavy Malbec. You want to drink something from high altitude.
Yep.
That's got a little bit more acidity, a bit more brightness, because your palate's going to, after 5 hours of eating and drinking, your palate's falling apart. So you need something that you can stand around the barbecue, or sit around as they all do, and have something that's going to perk your palate up and keep you alive. And I think that these high altitude Malbecs are the way to go.
Yep. All right. Well, I want to keep an eye on the time. We have one more wine, which is the Cabernet Sauvignon Yeoman Alexander Valley 2016. This is one of your signature selections. And there it is. And I will also put it up on the screen. Let's do a quick walkthrough of the tasting notes here, Nick, if you would, and your favorite meal for this signature wine.
Well, I do everything in my life to make 6 wines, and they're all super small volume. So this one we make about 300 cases, but I bring this wine down here to Chile and Argentina all the time because it seems to be a bit of a favorite. So people want to swap, high-end wines with me after I work with them for a couple of days. And this is the wine they always want. So we make 2. We make Yeoman from the Alexander Valley. We make a Game Ranch from Oakville, and they're made exactly the same. The only difference is they're picked on different days because, of course, Game Ranch is in Oakville, so it's a bit warmer, and the Alexander Valley is picked a bit later. And then the only other thing I do is I put them in slightly different barrels, so that because the Yeoman is going to have, because it's cooler, it's going to have a stronger tannin feel. I know they're still supple, they're still round, but I put it in a sweeter oak, and then I put the Game Ranch in an oak that's a little bit stronger. The key thing about the Yeoman vineyard, age. That's number one. It's 40 years old. Mm-hmm. It's on a gravelly loam, and it's a terraced vineyard. It's not straight rows. So it was planted 40 years ago, and it's head pruned. You know how you talk about head pruned Zinfandel? So this Cabernet is basically a head pruned cab. We put up about 4 wires on it about 20 years ago. So we can open up the canopy a little bit, but really, really unique. And this is, I think, after 32 years in the Alexander Valley, this is the best vineyard that I've ever worked on. I find it just so, if you are looking for a Napa-fied Alexander Valley, this is it. I mean, the volume of tannin is much higher than you typically get in the Alexander Valley, more like Napa Valley, but I pick it earlier. So I get better natural acidity and I get lower alcohol. Somebody asked about...
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, somebody asked about ageability. I have a very easy time answering that question because I've been making wine from this vineyard since 1989, and I can show you a wine I made in 1990 from the same vineyard, and it's still purple. So I know this wine will last 30 plus years because I still have one that I made 30 plus years ago. Often you'll ask a winemaker, how long will this wine last? And they'll go 20 years. And like, dude, how old are you? Show me a wine you made 20 years ago, and let alone from the same vineyard. How do you know it's going to last 20 years? And one thing you'll notice on wine, sometimes you get this crusty stuff here. Mm-hmm. Okay. You will not get this in my wine because I figured out a way to have that happen on skins during the extraction process. And when you see that crusty stuff on the side of the bottle, that's polymeric pigment falling out. And when polymeric pigment falls out, the wine goes from purple to red to brown to orange. And when it gets brown to orange, not only are you losing the polymeric pigment or the color, you're also losing acidity and you're losing fruit. So unless it was the year you were born or the year you got married or the year you divorced or the year whatever it was, get rid of it. Yep. Because that wine's not going anywhere. People go, oh, look at the sediment. Look at the they're not tartrates, but look at the sediment. No, that's bad. Because you're losing. The wine is getting too old.
So I got a question for you on this wine. If this is a Sonoma County, right? A vineyard. It's a Sonoma County Cabernet Sauvignon. This is a higher end wine from your portfolio of Sonoma selections. If this were a Napa Valley Cab, what would the price point be?
Double.
It'd be 140, right? 150.
Easy, yeah, easy.
Yeah. So again, to my point earlier, Sonoma County, you're getting tremendous quality and value at the same time. Which is
the only tricky thing about Sonoma County is we've got 14 appellations. So it's a very complex matrix of wind, heat, and the valley, where the valley, like people think Dry Creek runs north-south. No, it runs east-west. Alexander Valley runs north-south. So it's a very complicated, and that's why Sonoma has so many different appellations, because it's what this matrix is complicated, and that's what makes it cool and fun. But at the same time, I mean, we could create 50 different appellations and it would blow everyone's mind, and that would be very unhelpful. Yep. Because we got to try and be inclusive, not exclusive, you know. And I'm always one for not allowing appellations to be developed. And
what is this wine like? If somebody is a Cabernet, is a Napa Valley Cabernet, like a classic California Cab person, is this a classic California Cab, but with its own sort of special qualities? What's this wine like?
Well, to me, classic California Cabernet to me is too high in alcohol, and I find that too much black fruit. I want to have wine as I said earlier, with the Embankment, I want to have a little bit more acidity. I want to have more bright fruit, and I'm really trying to cut down on the barrel. So when I first started making the wine, when it was under another label, back in 1990, the alcohol was about 15.2, 15.5. I'm getting, I think in the next 2 years, I'll go under 14.
Wow. So the drinkability on this is really good. It's not going to just knock you out.
No. So easy to drink, but the tannins are seamless, and good structure, good texture, without wearing your palate out. You know, you don't have to go back to the cheese course. And there should be no, somebody asked about 15% alcohol. No, all wine should be under 14.5, except Zinfandel. Zinfandel is about the only one I would allow to go over 14.5.
So what's your favorite meal for this wine?
Man, my favorite meal is to drink it with about 4 other people, so I get enough to drink. No,
Steve says steak.
Yeah, wow, that's a given. But you know what? I drink this a lot with white fish. Like I don't eat, as I said, I don't eat a lot of carbs. So I don't do a lot of cheese sauces and things like that. But I try to get a little bit more PHE. Yeah, halibut's a great idea. Or you know, my favorite of all time is obviously snapper. So I take a lot of this down to New Zealand with me as well, and I'll do it and you can do it on the barbecue with and just do it very quickly. And don't be tied into.
Because the wine neophytes among us, me included, are like, wow, white meat fish with a Cabernet Sauvignon like this. I mean, it sounds great as you describe it, but it wouldn't have been a thought that I had otherwise.
Well, no, because it's the acidity. I mean, you're talking about white fish is more acidity than a salmon. I mean, salmon to me is a very heavy fish, very oily fish. It's great if you're trying to cover up faults, but and salmon has more fat, whereas as halibut, snapper, corvina, those sort of fishes those sort of fish are a little bit heavier and without the fat. So I find that, you know, I'm always about trying to perk up my palate and keep it lively and interesting. And I don't eat a lot of pasta. I mean, that would be something else to go with. But I do a lot of roasted vegetables as well. You know, the sweetness of a roasted Brussels sprout and a carrots and broccoli, like just those sort of things roasted. Mm-hmm. Man, perfect. And I don't eat meat every night, obviously, but I will drink Cabernet every night. So how do I make that match? And roasted vegetables are another way to go. I try to cut down on the garlic. My kids love garlic so much that they always end up throwing it in there and throws it off a bit. But yeah.
So one note I want to make for everybody watching, because we're going to wrap up in a moment, is if you're interested in these wines and you don't see them automatically on the website, email Karen at Goldschmidt Vineyards, and it's in the chat here. Karen at Goldschmidt Vineyards. If like there's a couple of the wines, Nick, that I know are not easy to find on the website per se. I know that Karen can help anybody get them if they're interested.
Exactly.
So, and for anybody who does want to go to the website, here it is. there's the URL. Those are the wines. I think the promo code will work on, will the promo code work on any wine on the website or only these 5?
You know what? I would try it on anyone.
Any wine, okay.
They're probably not that smart to have figured it out. But yeah, and if you want to follow us,
Karen just confirmed that it's any wines on the website. So go to
I didn't know Karen was listening.
GoldschmidtVineyards.com and use the promo code 5, like the number 5 wines, and you can use it on any wine on the website. Nick, this has been, as always, has been an education in a virtual tasting session.
Yeah, I love these things.
Great. And I think, listen, what I love about this session tonight is these are truly 5 wines that, you know, almost anything, any meal, any occasion you have in 2021, these wines, if you have these 5 wines, they're a great accompaniment to those occasions.
Yeah. And if you want to follow me on while I'm traveling around, I pretty much post 1 or 2 videos every day on Instagram. So if you go to Goldschmidt_Vineyards, you can see, like I posted a couple of videos today, and I was chastised for misspelling Colchagua Valley, so I had to go back and change it. But yeah, and I'll post a couple tomorrow. I'm going to be, as I said, I'm going to be in later in Casablanca, so I will make sure that I put up some videos on those tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, your travel itinerary is one of the most interesting that I know of. So it's great to be able to see that on Instagram. Well, Nick, thank you so much for being part of this, and say hello to all the good folks in Chile while you're down there. And thank you everyone for tuning in. It was awesome to see lots of people tonight, and also some people who are returning viewers. Thank you for your support. And next week, if you're interested, we are going to be streaming live from Jamesport Vineyards at the 900-degree wood-fired pizza oven, and we're pairing Mike's Hot Honey with pizza and a bunch of wine selections from the winery. So that'll be fun.
That sounds cool.
Yeah, it'll be really cool. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you soon. Stay safe out there, and have a great evening. Thank you, Nick.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye now.